But first, former President Donald Trump is defiant. He says that he will appeal the guilty verdict in his New York criminal case. The jury was unanimous in finding the presumptive Republican nominee guilty on all 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. In Manhattan Friday, Trump called the legal system a scam.
If they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. These are bad people. These are, in many cases, I believe, sick people.
Well, the current Oval Office holder is also reacting to the case. Here's what President Biden said during an address at the White House.
Now he'll be given the opportunity, as he should, to appeal that decision just like everyone else has that opportunity. That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
And we will have more from the White House in just a moment, including President Biden's new push for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But first, let's discuss the former president's conviction. We've been soliciting your questions about the implications of this verdict, and to answer them, we have Katrina Kaufman and Jessica Levinson. Katrina is a CBS News campaign reporter and an attorney. Jessica is a CBS News legal contributor and a professor at Loyola Law School. Katrina, I'm going to start with you because the question that we've heard the most is, what are the chances that Trump actually spends time in prison?
I'd say it's unlikely, but not impossible. Each of these counts carries up to 4 years in prison, so it's absolutely on the table. There was an attorney, Norm Eisen, who did an analysis of comparable cases, and he found that in them, 10% of the time, the defendants were sentenced to prison. So 90% weren't, but it is a possibility.
And Jessica, what arguments do you expect Trump's legal team is going to raise during his sentencing?
They will say first-time offender, nonviolent felonies, and I think they will point to those statistics that Katrina just brought up. The vast, vast majority of the time, somebody is not sentenced to prison. And do you, judge, want to go outside of what typically happens when we're showing that we're treating this convicted criminal defendant just like anybody else?
Well, so Katrina, he's not necessarily just like any other defendant because he's running for president. How does a felony conviction affect that?
Amazingly, it does not. He has no barrier to running for president, even though he's now a convicted felon. In fact, it's happened before. In 1920s, Eugene V. Debs ran for the Socialist Party from behind bars in Atlanta and got almost 1 million votes.
All right. So, Jessica, now I'm going to ask, though, with a felony conviction on his record, people want to know, can Trump vote for himself in the upcoming election?
It depends on the first question, whether or not he's incarcerated. So he's registered to vote in Florida. Florida law will refer to the place, the state, New York, where he was convicted. If he's not incarcerated at the time he needs to vote in New York, then he is free to vote. And so it depends based on the sentencing.
Interesting. All right, Katrina, I'm going to ask you this question because the verdict might have major implications for his ability to actually be out there on the campaign trail. How does it affect the campaign calendar? And how is Trump also even fundraising on this, trying to use this to his advantage?
He immediately began fundraising on this. He sent out messaging that he is now a political prisoner. The campaign says they've made almost $35 million just since this verdict came down. And in terms of the calendar, there's going to be a sentencing that's on July 11th, which is very notably just 4 days before the Republican National Convention. So Trump could be sentenced, we don't know, maybe to prison right before he becomes the Republican Party's official nominee for the presidential race. It's also just shortly after the first presidential debate as well. And there will also be a very momentous decision coming up before that. We're going to be hearing from the Supreme Court regarding his claim to presidential immunity, we expect in late June. So all of these things are happening as he is making his run for president.
Well, I want to get into presidential immunity and Supreme Court in just a moment. But before we leave this calendaring question, if he's not sentenced to actual time behind bars, another sentence that Judge Merchan may be considering is home confinement. And that might be something that's more in line with what other defendants who would face 34 felony counts of falsifying business records might face. Would that mean that he would have to ask the judge for permission anytime he wanted to travel, to accept nominees or debate invitations?
So house arrest is an option. There's also probation. I think realistically, they have said they're going to appeal, and he will absolutely ask for a stay, so a deferred sentence, so that he not be put on house arrest or put in prison or whatever the judge has decided while that appeal is pending. And I think it's very likely the judge would grant that. But you're right, there is a possibility that he could be given that sentence. And then, yes, there would be a lot of strictures on him.
Okay, Jessica, if they are appealing, which we know that they are, what does the legal team need to prove in order to have that to be successful in their appeal? And what is the likelihood, as Katrina brought up, that part of the appeal will be that he is running for president? He needs to have the full ability to travel.
So, well, that depends on the sentence and whether or not the sentence would limit his ability to travel. Now, every criminal defendant is going to appeal. So the fact that he says, we're going to appeal immediately, let's not take anything from that. There are, I believe, live issues to appeal in this case. What he would need is something that is bad enough that it's worth overturning the verdict. And that is a high standard because the criminal justice system likes finality. They don't like to go back and second guess what a jury has said unless there's a really good reason. So you would need some legal reason that amounts to clear air. Without getting into too much detail, I think the best potential hope is to say the way this was charged, along with the jury instructions, is problematic for two reasons. One, you have a federal candidate, but you're pointing to a New York election code. The other is that you have a state prosecution, but for part of this charge, you're pointing to a federal election violation as one of the options for unlawful conduct. So I think that's where we're going to see the most action on an appeal.
All right, Katrina, you brought up the Supreme Court. We're waiting to hear how they rule on presidential immunity. What are the implications and the timeline on that?
So it has major implications because if they rule against him, that means that the D.C. election interference case can move forward. That is Jack Smith's prosecution of his actions related to January 6th. If they rule in his favor, that could have major implications for our country. And then there are other options that could lead to it being sent back down to a court, which would lead to more additional hearings. But that will be very determinative in terms of what happens with the D.C. election interference case and whether we see any more trials happen before the election.
Jessica, we are out of time, but so many people have also asked us this question. Just can he pardon himself if, in fact, he becomes president again?
No, great question. Only the governor of New York can pardon for a state crime. And this is what this is, a conviction for a state crime.
All right. Katrina Kaufman, Jessica Levinson, thank you both. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now to discuss the president's remarks, both on Trump and the Middle East. So, Ed, let's start with the first conversation. President Biden's really been very careful in the past about addressing any of those legal troubles that his competitor is facing. What do you make about his remarks about the verdict?
Well, what was perhaps most interesting is that he, in essence, defended or tried to ensure the integrity of democratic institutions and norms by saying, look, the justice system in this country has existed for 250 years or so, and various verdicts and whatnot need to be respected. And then if you're somebody who disagrees with it, too bad. Like, that's the way the system works. A jury was picked. He has the right to appeal, which is also notable that the sitting president pointed that out, that Trump has that option. But otherwise, allow the verdict to rest and don't, use nefarious means to raise questions about it. Beyond that, he refused to answer at least one shouted question over the former president's unfounded allegation that he is the sitting president's political prisoner. But the way the current president reacted to that with a sort of big Cheshire cat grin is already being used by his opponents online and in advertising to suggest that maybe there are nefarious reasons for why these trials are underway. So in essence, Biden stoked the false, unfounded accusation that all of this is part of some vast conspiracy to take down Trump.
Let's turn to the other subject that was part of those remarks, the Middle East. President Biden said Israel has offered a roadmap to try and bring about a ceasefire in Gaza. I want to play for our viewers some of what he said.
It's time to begin this new stage. For the hostages to come home, for Israel to be secure, for the suffering to stop, It's time for this war to end, for the day after to begin.
So, Ed, what are the key aspects of the proposal, and why is it happening now?
That's what I was pulling up on my phone earlier. It's a three-phase plan that's been transmitted from Israeli officials to Hamas leadership by Qatar, which has been serving as an intermediary throughout all of this. And it essentially calls for the following: a 6-week ceasefire, new direct talks about a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the withdrawal of Israeli military forces from Gaza population centers, the release of elderly and female hostages by Hamas in exchange for hundreds of Palestinians in Israeli custody, and perhaps most critically, most urgently, passage of at least 600 trucks a day with humanitarian aid into Gaza to relieve those that are continuing to suffer amid concerns that famine and other humanitarian disasters are underway in that region. So it's an ambitious plan. Notable that the president endorsed it on a Friday afternoon on the East Coast of the United States, which is Friday night in the Shabbat in Israel, when many observant Israeli leaders maybe are unable to respond for almost 24 hours or so. But a statement from the Israeli prime minister signals that he and his coalition government authorized this ceasefire plan. Critically, though, it says, once again, that Israel's objectives are to get the hostages back and the total annihilation or the end of Hamas's military capabilities. What President Biden said in his remarks was, look, you've gotten Hamas to the point where they can't commit another October 7th style attack. You might need to take the win, in essence, what he was saying, and work with a far more depleted or neutered organization and get to peace. And called on the world, especially those that have been protesting on college campuses or in the streets of cities around the world, direct your pressure, direct your ire at Hamas leadership and encourage them to accept this deal if you're somebody that really does want a ceasefire.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, Ed, because the president seemed to be directing that part of his remarks directly at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but he didn't bring him up by name during his speech. At the same time, congressional leaders, as you're well aware, are inviting the controversial prime minister to address a joint session of Congress. Do you know, is the White House on board with that?
It's a bipartisan, bicameral invitation that we anticipate would happen before the August recess. The White House has been asked repeatedly in recent weeks whether it would support such an invitation. It wouldn't give an answer. We asked again today. We haven't gotten an answer.
All right. We know you'll keep asking. Ed O'Keefe, there at the White House. Thank you.
Take care.